I want to describe to you a certain very definite spiritual experience that can come to you only when you've made a certain degree of inner progress. What I'm talking about cannot happen to anyone who has not first entered the light, the area of light, in a small way. To make this clear to you, picture the following. Our nice example of a broad, spacious meadow with green grass and pretty brooks going through it. Sunny, comfortable, colorful flowers. Picture it in your mind. That's the enlightened place. That's where we want to live internally. Right next to the meadow, immediately next to it, is another place just as large, the dry desert. No streams, just sand and cactus. And it's just as big, as I said before, to the other beautiful place. Keep in mind an important word as we progress in this, and that's the word heat. The meadow is not hot. It's comfortable, just right. You're always at ease there. The desert is hot. All right. An individual finds himself in this life in the desert. He is hot with his own fiery emotions. They're always flaring up. Do you see why the word heat is aptly and correctly applied to anger, to rage, to fury? You're hot inside when you're mad, aren't you? Of course you know. Even your body heats up. So when we come into this world and a vicious society starts attacking us, we get hot. And we create this hot desert inside of ourselves and then have to live with what has been handed us, because when we're young we don't know any better. After being tired of being thirsty and not being able to find any water in the desert at all, we start looking elsewhere. We start looking outside of ourselves. And after many, many, many years of getting tired of consulting our own egotism, we step for the first time across the line into the meadow. And we begin to feel inwardly the difference, because this is where we're living all the time, whether it's in the desert or in the pretty meadow. When we take the first step into the meadow, remember now, we're just one step inside of it. And we're awfully close to that line. There's a line that divides the two. But it's a definite experience when we step over the line for the first time, because we can feel the coolness of it in contrast to our previous state of hot emotions. And we like it. We begin to, the commonest phrase possible that I can use is, we begin to feel better. We begin to feel better because the heat, the blasting heat of that desert makes us very uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, we're also irritable, aren't we? That's why people living in the desert are crabby all the time, inwardly, whether they show it outside or not. So we're very close to the line while we make our first breakthrough out of our own dark minds, the desert of our own dark mind. As we continue to work, we get a little deeper into the meadow, a little farther away. And the danger of falling back decreases as we get farther away from the line. Now here is the main point of what we're talking about this morning. By the way, this experience, as I said at the start, can only happen to those who have broken through. It can't happen to people who live totally and altogether in the desert, which is your neighbors. When you get into the meadow, enjoying it, begin to feel different, begin to feel free, begin to enjoy the beauty of it, something happens because it's new to you and you're not very strong. Nevertheless, you've got into it. What happens all the time is that you suddenly forget where you are in the meadow. You forget that it is a meadow. And you go into your eyes closed, spiritual eyes closed, and you go into absent-mindedness. You lapse from your awareness of where you are. You forget. At that instant, you go to sleep. And when you go to sleep, you start wandering, staggering, absent-mindedly back to the desert again. And you cross over the line. Have any of you had this experience so far? Do you know what I'm talking about? All right. So you go back into the desert. And then all of a sudden you become aware that you're there, and you consciously walk over into the meadow again. And then you fall asleep again. It goes back and forth thousands and thousands of times. Now, a little clearer? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. A little bit, at least. Our aim, of course, is to stay awake while we're in the meadow, but we can't do that because we're too weak and too young. So you go back into the desert again. Now, what does the desert consist of? I set the background for it by describing it as a very hot place. Look and see what it means to be in the desert as a means of you saying, wait a minute, I forgot where I am supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in that state that I really knew it this morning, because for a while everything was quite clear to me. I knew I was awake. Without thinking about it, I knew I was. But I went to sleep. Okay, what do we mean by wandering back, staggering back with your eyes closed back into the desert? Anything inside of you that is hot. Now you have to do some work. I'm asking you now, what inside of you represents the torrid heat of the desert? I'll tell you. I'll give you examples of it. Do you like to tell people off? Someone attacked you and you couldn't attack back then because it's the boss or spouse or whatever, but you go back and sulk somewhere, and pretty soon desert scenes begin to form in your mind, right? Yeah, you're getting it now. And you start to tell the husband off in your mind. You're in the hot desert. You forgot. You start to tell your wife off. And you can even go back, and you have done it. You can even go back 20 years, 30 years, and tell someone off. Right? Your parents. Equally, when you tell someone off, you also have the opposite. You picture them telling you off, bawling you off. Bawling you out. Watch how the two go back and forth. Because you like to be a victim as much as you like to make them the victim in your hot dreams. I guarantee you, you think of a humiliating experience where someone bawled you out, made you ashamed. That is heat of the desert that you have agreed to stay in because you have forgotten where you really live. Now, let's add something strange, very strange. It won't be strange to you after a while. Wherever you may be, whichever place you may be, whether in the desert or in the pretty meadow, either place, nothing at all is happening to you. There is no one to experience the heat. There's no one to experience the pleasure. No one that you used to call yourself. I'll go further than that. Nothing has ever happened to who you really are. Nothing is happening right now to who you really are. Nothing except the reception of truth. Nothing will ever happen to you except as you get rid of your false sense of self, then something happens to your true nature. It's a very difficult point to explain, so I'm going to try it again. When you're in the dark desert, the dry desert, the experience of heat is not yours. It is occurring inside of you because that's where you're living. And you identify with the heat of the desert and say, angry people, hateful, I'm going to strike back at the world. And you call that you. You want it to be you. You, by your true nature, can never be hell. The heat of the desert. But that's all you've got. And so you call it you. And when you're in the beautiful meadow, don't you dare, and you won't, if you're in your right mind. When you're in the desert, don't exalt and say, how beautiful is this place. If you do that, that is you talking, and that is not the other place. It's the desert disguised in your own mind as the meadow. Because when you're in the pretty meadow, there is no you to say how beautiful. Billions of people sing hymns and do what they call praising heaven. They do that because they imagine that they're in a spiritual place, the meadow, but they're not there at all. It's simply the old nature which has deceived them into thinking that they're saved, that they're rescued from the meadow. You yourself, your real nature, can distinguish, understand where you should be and where you lapse from awareness of where you are. You yourself can finally actually see the back and forth process. But it is essential that you practice this self-interruption that we briefly talked about last night. Practice this self-interruption so that when you're in the desert and enjoying the heat because it represents your present nature, you can suddenly say, wait a minute, where am I? And you'll catch the mental movie, the very dry, thirsty mental movie going through your mind, and you'll say, I begin to understand a little bit better. I wanted to be there because I could be the center of the hot feeling. I am the one who's getting bawled out again when I was a 10-year-old child by the school teacher. Remember how you were humiliated in school certain ways? Or at home by your parents? You make yourself the center of the heat in order to retain your dry, hellish nature. When you see that this is what you're doing, when you see it, that is the action that impels you to turn around, to wake up, to open your eyes. What am I doing here? Wow, are you going to run the 100-yard dash in 8 seconds flat when you see that? Head back to where you know you belong. Now, again, this experience that I've described can't happen to people who are out in the world who do not love inner life, inner change. This can only happen if you've stepped across the line for the first time. They're there all the time. That's all they live in. And when you live altogether in the dry desert, the only thing you have is to call the dry desert the peaceful meadow, quoting religious books and talking about God and all that. What's real strong? To talk about God, to merely talk about inner rescue, about peace of mind and spiritual heaven and all that, to merely talk about it is representative of a person wandering in the desert. All he has is words. And tell him that, and he will prove it by blasting you with his own heat, which is all he has. You want to cool down your life? Then you do this. Work until you've made the one step over, one step over so you can see the difference. And you fall back time and time again because you fall asleep. You lapse from awareness of where you should be. The process of going back and forth becomes clearer and clearer to you simply as you do it. And the word recognition is a key word in this, where you see where you know where you are, and you know you're awake. When you are really in the meadow, you know you're there because you know that you're not hot. It's cool, and you sit or stand very calm and very relaxed, and you walk across the room knowing you're walking across the room. You see everything, and you sense, not thinking, but you sense that there's no heat being generated in you. And you know you're that. You know, when you're awake, you know you're awake. When you're in the Meadowland, you know you're in the Meadowland without thinking about it. When you go to sleep because someone looks at you in a certain way, or something inside of you starts taking you over, the old love comes back. The old love for the dry desert comes back. And it's very alluring. You want to be bawled out again by your parents. You want to have that fight that you men had when you're in the army, bawled out by the sergeant. You want to be in the midst of dryness and heat. See, you don't have a complete love of heaven yet, of the meadow, of the cool, pleasant, beautiful place. It is your old nature that loves the desert that keeps dragging you back. And so you stand around there, and pretty soon an impression comes to you, and you close your eyes, and the next thing you know, or rather the next thing you don't know, is the feeling of heat again. As a method then, begin to recognize the coming of heat as it begins to enter inside of you. Emotional rage, inner quarreling, snapping back at someone, a certain kind of a hiding out, a defensive position. And where you see that a mistake has been made and you identify with it and say, I have made a mistake, how humiliating to me. I told you about 5 minutes ago that no events ever happen to you, even your mistakes. You have grabbed onto them, and that is pain. Ego humiliation is pain. It can be a learning experience, of course. But if you want to get rid of the pain after making a mistake of any kind, if you want to get rid of it, then you have to get rid of thinking, as I said 5 minutes ago, that it happened to you. It didn't happen to you at all. It happened, but it didn't happen to you. It couldn't have happened to you because you are not you. But you grab onto it, which is a part of the desert experience. And the longer you stay in the desert experience, as long as you stay in the meadow, the longer you stay, the longer you're able to stay there, the clearer it becomes to you that you really don't have a life of your own. You have another kind of life. And at first, the reason you fell asleep in the meadow and went back is because you yearned to be you. You yearn to have that label on top of you whereby you could say, I, me, and mine, and all that. The longer you stay, the easier it becomes for you to see that your mistake was to associate yourself with a mechanical movement of making the mistake. A mistake being something that is done in self-defeat because you were asleep. When we're younger, and we've carried all these over, when we're younger, we have thousands of them. You can take your pick, can't you? Have you ever noticed how one time it's this great error, and the next time it's that one? There's plenty of them for you to choose from, and you do indeed alternate between maybe the 4 or 5 top ones. The time comes when you begin to value being in the meadow, being awake, more than you falsely value wandering around the dry desert calling out, me, me, me. Why did this happen to me? Why am I tormented like this? If only my parents hadn't done that, screamed at me the way they did. If that early marriage or sexual affair with a boyfriend or girlfriend, if only that hadn't got me off on the wrong track. See, you are lying because you love the dryness and the desert. You are lying when you run those through your mind. Now you listen to me. Most of what I'm telling you has gone right over your head, and I'll tell you why. because you don't know how long you have been in the desert and how you yearn to remain there. You don't know that this is what's valuable to you. And your old nature doesn't want to see that it's valuable to you. I said, this experience is only for those who have stepped over the line, briefly even, over from the line to the desert, from the desert to the meadow, so that you can begin to see the difference. Totally asleep people will have no interest at all in what we're talking about this morning. Now, are you totally asleep or 99 and 9/10? That is desert lovers of the desert. I have to emphasize this then. What I've talked about this morning will have no meaning to you, no great meaning, unless you understand that you are the people who love the desert yourself. Maybe you have just stepped over the line. You've been over maybe 5 minutes in your entire adult life. 5 minutes out of the rest of your life. Something is going to have to keep you over there. Then I'll guarantee you it isn't going to be your old nature. The only duty of your old nature is to get you back into the desert where it controls your life. Because when you're in there, you have no control at all. All you have is heat, hotness. The longer you stay, you understand that you, listen to this, ooh, how nice, that you yourself can't prevent yourself from falling asleep. That is what you are. Your realization that you can't, of your own will, of your own mind, the realization that you can't keep yourself awake in the meadow, the realization of that is what keeps you in it. Because this means the disappearance of your inclination to go back. What you have to do is see you can't do anything to keep yourself awake. Except one thing. Yield to the source, capital S. Yield to the source that can begin to fill your life in a new way. So that it reminds you. It warns you. Watch it. You're falling asleep. You're in the meadow, and the old nature, which is ever persistent, ever vicious, the old nature begins to whisper to you. The voices start talking to you and starts to take you over, and you listen to that. The only thing that can keep you awake is something that is awake itself, and that's not your intellect. That's not your old experiences. Oh, how nice to say. This is a real prayer. I'm going to give you a real prayer. I really can't do it. I can't change my terrible temper, that which belongs to the desert. I can't even of myself stay awake. I can't do anything. Of course you can't. You can't do anything. There's no one there to do anything. There's a part which can realize your helplessness, your hopelessness in the face of the avalanche of hot emotions, of yearnings to be someone. There is something that is all-powerful and above that, which is represented by the peaceful meadow. The old nature takes the green, the grass and the flowers and the pretty brooks. The old nature takes that as something undesirable because the desert is the desert and wants to only be the desert. Therefore, anything other than that outside of it is the enemy. Now, something in you presently considers freedom, the freedom of the pretty place, considers that to be the enemy and considers the desert to be the friend. Right? Don't you know that the whole world thinks like that? This talk is for people who have taken one step over the line and then find themselves falling back again. And if you have done that, you will understand what I'm talking about. But this description will make it clearer to you. You'll see yourself wandering around out in the desert, and all of a sudden it will come to you where you have been. And when you realize where you have been in the desert, instantly, automatically, all by itself, it changes. You're over the line. Now, you don't imagine what a realization is. You can't imagine it. You simply have to see it. Realization, this can go on for years. Realization of you telling that person off, of you defending yourself, of you being, I made a mistake and everyone is going to know about it. You've connected yourself wrongly with that event. That great blunder, you've connected yourself with it. As you see this, I will tell you, you will begin to have a sensing of something that is so beautiful that you don't have to be someone who is connected with the mistake, the blunder, in order to exist. And then you see that you didn't exist when you connected yourself with the blunder. You didn't exist, but you have a false feeling of life, a false feeling of existence, which you thought was necessary. Now you see that the only true and necessary thing is to see through it. So that there's no one who ever does anything good or bad. See? Which is it? Which went through your mind this morning? Which dominated it? A person who is good or a person who is bad? Probably mostly bad, because self-condemnation and guilt is so overwhelmingly powerful. And I wish to avoid humiliation in our own eyes or in the eyes of anyone else. That is such an avalanche feeling inside of us. You will catch a glimpse, and with a great sigh of relief, that when something happens, I have to use the word you, and I use it consciously. When something happens to you, and you remember everything you've heard this morning, plus everything else you've learned, you remember that no mistakes can be made by you, your real nature, because truth never makes mistakes. And you never made a mistake even shouting out angrily at someone down at the office or at home. Even that wasn't your mistake, but a mechanical movement of loss of control, the desert nature, which took charge of you because you were asleep. And you see that even that wasn't you. You never do anything good, and you never do anything bad. There is no one to do either thing. Seeing this, you have gone through the whole process of giving yourself up so that you can have something that is utterly new, which doesn't have to think itself into existence and doesn't have to rethink and recreate itself into existence, which no longer loves problems and humiliations because it saw through the whole act, the whole hoax, that actions are you. Actions are not you. Above the action of heat in the desert, there is a different kind of action which is complete, which is very silent, which is a state of being, which is a state of knowing, which is a state of utter quietness all the way through, and which you can look out at the world just as you could be in the meadow itself. When you're in the meadow, you can look back and see the desert, but you're no longer a part of it. This is what it means to be in this world, but not be a part of it. And you can be in your own life, your career, your business, whatever it might be, and you can look all around you, and that dry desert can't touch you anymore. Last night, someone made a remark, a very good remark, that once you begin to see through these things, the remark went, how can you ever have anything to do with the world anymore? How can you possibly want anything to do with those people wandering around the desert because you see how vicious they are because you were vicious when you were there? You have a lot of hatred in you. What else do you have out there? Let me tell you, I don't have to tell you, desperate people are hateful people. You see a desperate man or a desperate woman sobbing and crying what the world has done to them, run as fast as you can. That's the part of the desert. And if you're living all your life in the meadow, oh, how clear it becomes what that desert is like. And you look back there and you see those whining people. All they can talk about is money making. All they can talk about is how they're going to get somewhere. You look back at them and you understand them 100%, don't you? You know why, too, because you recognize yourself in them. You know very well, that used to be me. And you also know that isn't you anymore. Use all this then to stay longer in the pretty place. and wander less into the old place. When you are accused of something, someone really goes after you, attacks you, you have one duty and one duty only, which is to see whether that accusation caused fire in you, caused the heat of the desert to come in you. Don't you dare use your intellect to say that man is wrong or that man is right. For example, in feigned humility. You know, you're right, I am pretty bad. All that is fake. You have no business going into the opposites when someone accuses you of something, because you will lie. The very fact that you choose to go into the opposites of either attacking or defending gets you off on a lying reaction to the accusation. Your one duty is for you, with ruthless observation and honesty, see whether there was fire in you. Heat, hotness. Don't lie. And don't call that heat your righteous reaction. If you are in heat from the desert, you are wrong. Now you can start with that to be intelligent. There is no heat, fire, the fire of hell, in the peaceful place. Therefore, if you feel fire, you know automatically that you're in the wrong place. Fire. What is fire? Fire is anger. Fire is yes, but. Watch yourself tremble with the heat. Watch your face. Listen to the tone of your voice. That's fire, and you won't see it. You don't want to see it. You're so busy defending your position, so busy defending the dry, hot desert, calling it the heaven, the peaceful place, the meadow. You're so busy defending it that you can't see, and you never will see as long as you defend. Because you defend because you and the desert are one thing. You are exactly the same thing. There's one thing, you hyphen desert. That's what you hang on to. Will you give it up? Will you honestly say, I am burning with what that man said? Even if I'm smiling, I'm burning with that accusation. See that and know that you are destroying yourself with the heat of the desert. Don't go into intellectualization. Don't go into thought. It will divide one way or another between defense and attack, and you will keep yourself hotter than ever before. When someone asks you a question, a challenging question, and you have to think about it, your answer will be wrong. If you struggle inside of yourself, that is the ego searching frantically back in memory, trying to find the answer that will protect your position. And if you have any position at all, you are wrong. If you have a position, you are wrong. When you are no longer there, you have no position with opposites on it. Therefore, you don't have to struggle looking for an answer. It is there, and you talk back to the person, reply to the person, easily, effortlessly, without the heat of the desert. So, watch for the heat of the desert when someone challenges you in any way at all. If the desert is there, you are there. If you are there, you are wrong, and you're going to give a wrong answer. Only truth is cool and peaceful and quiet, and it is effortless. Good morning. Once upon a time, there was a civilization called Ape Land. And Ape Land was occupied by apes. And it was a large civilization, thousands of apes. One day, one of the apes was wandering around the jungle looking for food and whatever he could get for himself. And he wandered to the edge of the jungle. And opposite the edge of the jungle, at some distance, was a city occupied by human beings. And between the edge of the jungle and the city was a trash dumping site, you know, where you take all your junk and throw it out into the trash pile. So the ape was, a single ape from Ape Land was wandering around. He went over to the junk pile. And he was poking around there, and he saw a big stack of discarded clothes. And it rang a bell in his mind because he had seen human beings before wandering around. He, in his imitative mind, said, why don't I be like those human beings are and wear clothes like they do? So he poked around, he found an old ragged coat. He struggled, and he finally got the coat on. He found a pair of trousers, and he awkwardly, after a half hour, managed to get them on. He got a big pair of floppy shoes that he managed to get on. He felt awkward, but it was very interesting to him that this was something different. So while he was wandering around, he's looking for a hat next, because he'd seen a strange sort of thing on top of human beings. He understood it was called a hat. While he was looking around for a hat, he noticed one of those human beings off 100 yards away from him. But he didn't pay too much attention. He was too interested in getting the clothes. And while he was poking around, getting more clothing for himself, he heard the human being yell out, hello there, good morning. And the ape looked over, and he said, good morning, he yelled back. He was a talking ape, you understand? And the human being type creature turned and went away. But the ape stood there stunned and frozen at what had happened. Two thoughts all at once were crowding through his mind at once, each chasing each other out, and he wanted to get each thought clear, each of the two. So he sat down a little bit and scratched his head a little bit. Finally, his mind slowed down a little bit, and he was able to separate the two thoughts that were crowding each other out in his mind. And the first and most astounding thought of all was, that human being over there thought I was one of his kind. He made a mistake. He looked at me and he thought I was a human being. How curious, he said. And the follow-up thought to that, the second thought was, you know, we apes, we've seen a lot of those human beings, and well, they have a lot of food, and they have nice, comfortable homes to live in, and they have great power over each other. They can hurt each other anytime they want, great power. And they do it all the time because we've seen them. We've seen what they call battlefields, and we've seen that they have jails for unruly human beings. They have great power, and he got real jealous all of a sudden at all the things that human beings have. So on the way back to his home in Apeland, his tree in Apeland, his mind started working. And so after the thoughts again became clearer to him, he called several of his friends together. And he said, you know, I had a very strange experience the other day. A human being thought that I was one of them. All I did was put on clothes. I wonder if we could, all of us, put on clothes like they do, and they would mistake us for one of those, and we'd get in on the benefits that they have. All of them, no more bananas, everything we want. So they said, well, I'll tell you what, they got together and they said, I'll tell you what, we'll send out a volunteer squad to see what happens. So about 10 of the apes got together and they went over to the trash site again, and they put on clothes, both men and women, and went on toward the city, to the edge of it, and they walked around, walked down a little bit down the street, one of the outskirt streets, just to see what would happen. And sure enough, people waved at them, nodded at them, and talked to them. They went right by a shop, and a salesman came out and said, would you like to buy something? And they all went back, and they said, it works. Apes can parade around acting like human beings. Oh, we made a few mistakes, and a few people looked at us kind of suspicious, but we can work at it. We can become skilled in imitating human beings. So they set up Ape College, and they had courses, vast courses, all day long. How to talk like human beings, of course, how to dress, how to conduct business, how to preach sermons, how to look pious, the whole business. A course in how to look and act like human beings. Anyone who graduated was allowed to go into society and infiltrate society and become one of them. And they did exactly that. Hundreds of apes, thousands of apes, so perfectly had completed their course, that they went in and they conducted their own business and they mixed with the human beings. And they began to take over because they had a certain evil aggressiveness in them that they were so jealous of the human beings that they wanted to take over. And they did. They became elected to public office and they sat down and they made laws. This went on for a while. There was one man who was watching all this, a man who knew the difference between a human being and an ape. And he could detect the difference. He could see 10 people in human clothes in a crowd, and he could tell which 5 were apes and which 5 were human beings. He said to himself, I better sound the alarm before it goes any further. So he did just that. He spread the alarm that there's something wrong. We're being invaded and we don't know it. Let's not let this go any further until it's too late, or they're going to take over our civilization. And apes are very evil. Their motives are evil. By that time, it was too late because the apes were in power. And what happened finally, as you should know by now, is that the man who sounded the warning was chased away, chased out of town. He was made an outcast because the apes started spreading lies about him. And the other people, the human beings, feeling guilty about it. See, a tyrannical group always tries to make people feel guilty, and you fall for it. The man was outlawed, and now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the conclusion of the story. It's too late. It's too late for society. The ape-like natures in human beings have taken over. Where would you find a human being who's really sane, who doesn't have ape-like characteristics in him? The apes are in control of the government, of religion, of society. The apes are in control of commerce, of finances. This is why you get gouged where you can get gouged, when you have no defense. Try to get someone to just charge you a reasonable price for it doesn't happen. It can't happen. The apes are in charge. The ape minds are in charge. And here's the conclusion. This man who saw through the whole fakery, he didn't care whether he was kicked out or not. He didn't want anything from society, from that society that had been infiltrated and taken over. He didn't care. He wasn't part of it. He neither had ape-like qualities, nor was he intimidated or deceived by the apes. Nothing delighted him more than to be an outcast. To be an outcast in that sense is to be free. Final point. There's an awful lot of unseen stuff in you that thinks that you owe something to this ape-like society. You think that there's something in you that owes something to them. It's not clear in your mind. It's not black and white in your mind as it should be. There are a lot of gray areas where you still have been so propagandized by the apes that you think that you owe them something, and they make you feel guilty. Let me tell you why you feel guilty. Because you're an egotist who still thinks you have something to give to anyone, and you have nothing at all to give to anyone. You have no goodness, no gifts. Where did you get the gifts? You get a gift for someone, you give it to someone, you say, I gave the gift. That's why you give it anyway, because you want to say, I gave the gift. That lowers your guilt over being an ape. There's nothing in you that can possess virtue, that can possess anything, not even your own life. If you see this, you will have a life. You don't have a life of your own now. You still think you have something to give. Look at the horror of the apes in this world. I don't know how many times I've heard the word love in the last 2 weeks. These are apes who think they have love to give. How many times have we gone over that? They think they have intelligence. Substitute intelligence for love for just a minute. All those stupid people, and they are stupid. All those stupid people think they're intelligent. They even think that to ask me a question is a sign of intelligence, and I know better. I know it's a sign of complete stupidity and ignorance and hostility. You don't put yourself on the level of truth by using the word truth or by raising your hand and asking a question. See, apes are self-deceived. They've been wearing those clothes of human beings so long that they come to believe in it. They think that they are what they appear to be on the outside. From now on, you will remember the following. Whenever you see a human being who is sarcastic, who is sneering, who has a hard look on his face, who argues, who fights, who is generally antagonistic toward anything, not just toward the truth, but toward anything at all, I want you to know you're looking at an ape. Now, an ape doesn't know he's an ape anymore. The act has been going on so long. But I want you to know, and I want you to know when you see the ape inside yourself. This is why I don't want anything to do with you people even. I know how to have proper contact with you. If I didn't see through you people seated right here, you'd drain the life out of me. You would actually think that you know as much as I do. All new people who come here do. This is why you submit to the truth or you leave. And no one is happier than me to see you go out that door, because you're of no use to anyone here. You're no use to me, you're no use to the truth, you're no use to yourself. Trash belongs outside this room. Ah, how nice to know that trash is trash, human trash, apes, without feeling guilty about it, without no doubts about it at all. If you ever caught me having doubts about you, the apes in you would start to attack and deceive, and I know it. And I have no doubts about any of you or anyone else in the world. Truth has no doubts about it. Probe a little something here by asking a couple questions. This might be quite revealing. Let me see the hands of those of you in this room who have sort of a natural tendency to like bananas. Let's see the hand. Now, second part of the question. How many of you also have a great pleasure and joy in naturally climbing around in trees? Need I say more? Next speaker. The ape nature in any man or woman cannot express a light spirit in life. The ape nature has no sense of humor. The reason for this is because the ape nature is totally 100% concerned with itself, with getting, with acquiring, with hanging on to other people, hanging on to possessions. Now, another way to say this is that the ape nature revolves constantly in self-worry. 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 It is completely concerned with itself. Now, this self-worry is a heaviness. It is a weight. But it calls this heaviness of self-worry proper seriousness. And it would feel guilty if it ever got lighthearted and friendly and pleasant. The ape is never pleasant. There's no way. He doesn't have pleasantness. He's too concerned and wrapped up. He's looking out the world, he's suspicious. The ape nature feels, get this, that it would be disloyal to be pleasant. Disloyal to what? To its own sickness. To all its I thoughts revolving around itself and what you're going to get. And that horrible, horrible state of self-protection is paramount in keeping it heavy, self-concern. The way to grow is to begin to be disloyal to yourself. And if you be disloyal long enough, you'll see that there's no one there. And the whole idea of self-worry was a hoax. There is no one there. I am telling you, I've told you for years, there is no one there to be worried over. But you still continue to worry because you want to believe that there is. And this is why you are unpleasant and why you're depressed. And why you sit in this room and you can't be lighthearted. You would rather be loyal to what is wrecking you than to the truth which could free you from self-wreckage. See what I'm talking about. Dare to not be serious according to what you call being serious. What you call being serious prevents you from being intelligently serious. Self-destruction consists of a refusal to see self-destruction. There it is, right there. As I said earlier, we'll have a nice, quiet, informal meeting tonight. And I'll ask for questions later on, or if you want to just supply a topic, that will be fine. But before that, a few comments. I'm being very serious now and not sarcastic. When I tell you, all of you, that you had better avoid associating with yourself as much as possible. You are a positive danger to yourself. You walk around your day with all that weakness. I am astonished, not really, but I put it that way, that you are not embarrassed by your very weakness. That you're not ashamed of being what you are. Because you are a wreck. You're a bundle of weakness. You can't take care of yourself. Now look, God gave you a mind with which you can conduct your business and dress yourself and clean the house and drive your car. Anyone can do that. They can train a monkey to do half those things and more. You are supposed to be a human being, a man or a woman who can rise to a higher level than the one you now have. There must be an explanation as to why you are not ashamed of yourself. You should be. I tell you, every one of you should be. So there has to be some kind of an explanation as to why you're not. Now I'll tell you what it is. You don't know any better. When you're a boy or girl, 7 or 8 or 10, you didn't know that there was something higher than you. And there's no way you could. That's legitimate. A child can only behave the way he is, 7 or 8 or 10. But you grew up and you finally saw that you could handle mathematics a little higher than in the 6th grade than you could in the 3rd grade, arithmetic. You found out that you could grow, that you could develop. And then you reached a certain age, 18 or 19, and the physical stopped developing, more or less. And you took your total development for granted, that this is where you had to go and this is where you stopped. How astonishing that you can't see just exactly where you are, and you're not embarrassed to pieces to associate with yourself. Only one thing can rescue you, and that is an absolute, all-out, full-time self-arousal of your inner condition. I vow you are all in love with sweet violin music. And all day long you let it play through your mind and through your spirit. You don't have the idea at all as to what this room is all about. It is not all about you getting up tomorrow and behaving the exact same way that you behave today. Looking at other people, for example, and all you have is a weak response. Never mind the false Christians dishonoring God. You dishonor God. Just by the way you are. And the way you act is an outcome of the way you are. Why do you settle for it? Your unconscious, unseen moaning is your treasure. Your weakness is your miserable, wretched, false strength. Now listen to what I just said. Your weakness, your inadequacy, your fawning, wandering around looking at people hoping they'll smile at you, that is your pseudo-strength. Because the script has been memorized perfectly. No extra effort required. The purpose of this class is to give you a chance for something extra. That revolt, that screaming out no, and you still don't get it. Poor, pathetic little sparrows. Right where I work, out my window, I can see sparrows there all the time. Put breadcrumbs and food out for them. Sitting right at my desk, and they're several yards away, and through the window, I can put my hand up like that, and they fly away in fear. When you walk out of here, and you walk down toward your car, a sparrow will suddenly run away from you, won't he? You're not thinking about the sparrow. A dozen sparrows will fly away. You walk down any street, right? You're not even thinking about them. But they have a sparrow-like mind, extremely limited in intelligence. All they can do is look and sense a danger and run away. And you don't do any different. The slightest wave of someone's disapproval, and you run away. You want to cry. How dishonoring to God. What a disgrace you are to the human race. Everyone, practically everyone is a disgrace to the human race. Poor, pathetic people. You're going to be one of them. You're going to be one of the billions of sparrows flittering around looking for a breadcrumb. Someone waves his hand and you get scared and run away. A sparrow can't change. You have the possibility for it. Now, let me tell you, there's such a thing as a natural, legitimate right dislike. Too bad that you don't have a natural, legitimate right dislike of your own cowardice. Contrary to disliking it, you love it so much that you continue with it day after day, night after night. Now, do you suppose for 1 second that a coward is going to call himself that? Do you suppose that a deceitful so-called social leader is ever going to call himself a miserable coward who won't face his own life and therefore, in order to escape it, proclaims himself a leader of the people? Well, you might not call yourself a leader of the people, but you call yourself the leader of your own life. And you can never quite make the label stick, can you? Deep down inside, you know what you are, but you don't have the honesty and the decency to see it. If all you had was your weakness, if that is all you had was your inadequacy, if that was all you had, it would vanish. But you add something to your weakness, and what you add to it is something called a lie, called a falsehood, called a hypocrisy. I wonder if you can understand what I'm going to say next. Let's see if you do. You see if you do to yourself. All human beings, whether they're world leaders in the great halls, in the legislator halls, all great and famous people, and all people in authority, all people 40 years old, 60 years old, 80 years old, men and women alike, all of them want to run behind the curtain of their stage theater. They want to run behind the curtain and cry. There's no hope for most people. There's absolutely no hope at all. Well, we're talking to you people. I'm talking about you somehow arousing yourself. You've been given the opportunity. Arousing yourself and having the courage to have nothing but your weakness. You can't do that. You can't just have that. You have to lie about it and say you're strong. And be so evil as to call yourself a Christian. God have mercy on you for calling yourself a Christian when you're really a devil. Let me start all over. If I were you, I would avoid yourself as much as possible. You're not fit to live with. You in your present condition are not fit company for yourself. You're destroying yourself. And you've been told many times how to stop associating with yourself. You've been told the danger of you doing tomorrow what you did today. You've been told the danger, but it doesn't appear to be a danger to you. Because you have so many pseudo-happinesses, so many things to look forward to. And you think that your life is okay. Well, now look. If you wander around in the dark jungle with all the beasts out there, but you have your eyes closed, of course you're not going to be scared of the lions and the tigers and the wolves out there. You've got your eyes closed. You try to fool that sensing that you have of where you really are. You know very well you're living in a jungle of your own maniacal emotions and thoughts. You know very well you're living abnormally. Of course you know it. That's why you're so scared. That's why you're so pathetic. That's why you're so desperate. Question. What's wrong with you opening your eyes and seeing that you're wandering around lost in the jungle with all those fierce beasts out there? In there. What's wrong with that? You know they're there. Of course you know they're there. You're living with them. They attack you all the time. Isn't there fights going on inside of you all the time? And isn't there a great hatred inside of you that you can't get all those things that you want? What do you want? You want that man? You want that woman? You want that money? You want that excitement? What do you want? Come on, what do you want? Have you ever noticed all the hatred you have and how utterly bitter you are against life, who put you into this condition? Life puts you in here and then denies you all the things you want. And you don't even have the elementary wisdom to begin to investigate why you have all that violence inside of you. What you like to do best of all is fight. No, you don't go around hitting people with your fists. You don't go down and join the mad mob down on the street corner. But oh boy, do you have violence in you. I know it. I know it better than you do. Too bad you don't know it. Look at your own life. It's your own life and you don't even know how violent you are. Your so-called stage performance are nothing but a cover-up for your weakness, which is violence. Weakness and violence are the same thing. You are weak, therefore you're violent. It's a good thing there's restraining laws that keep you from doing what you'd like to do, to strike back at a world that has denied you your so-called rights. I heard a ad message from a very prominent social group. And their chief line in their ad was something as follows. Our aim is to make this a better life for all. That's a devilish statement to make. Their aim is not to make a better life, better place for all. Their aim is to destroy as many other people as they can in order to get what they want out of them. Cunningly get their money, get their support, get their testimony. And everyone belonging to this particular organization is a devil. And nobody dares to see it or to say it. One reason being, they are fearful of the attack by the devils whom they call devils. I'm trying to get over to you the incredible, endless depth of the sickness of this world. I'm trying to get over to you the endless sickness and depth and weakness inside you. As long as you have weakness, you have no love, you have no consideration. All you can do is hope that something will fall your way and play your little tricks to get something from someone. There is absolutely, now listen to me, I'm going to give you a fact. Now let's see if you get it. You don't get much. Let's see for once if you can get something. There's absolutely no hope for almost everyone here on earth. No hope at all. There's no point trying to help them. What you can do is stop associating with yourself long enough to stand apart and see what you are like. And then you'll see and understand what I have been talking about. And I'll tell you you'll become an inner loner. The beauty of your life will be apart from human beings. Sure, you can be with them socially. We're here socially tonight. You can go shopping. But the pleasure of not having anything to do with them spiritually or psychologically, the pleasure is unbounded. And it's the second pleasure, by the way, because the first pleasure was not having anything to do with yourself anymore. How can you stand yourself? Familiarity is the answer to that. All you have to do is get up in the morning and hate yourself as you do. Create enemies as you do. Find junk to fill your mind with all day long, which you do. No effort required. See, you're told here, you have to do something that is truly new. Now, to do something truly new means you can't do what you usually do. But to stop doing what you usually do, you have to recognize it as a repetitious behavior and emotions and reactions. And look, it doesn't require a great genius of an intellect to realize that if you are wrong inwardly, you will do wrong inwardly and outwardly, and you will be wrong and suffer from it. A wrong thought produces a wrong feeling. Now, what's a wrong feeling? A wrong feeling is any feeling that's apart from what is true and good and peaceful. Now look, see, I've explained the whole thing to you, and you don't get it. You don't get it because you call yourself, unconsciously again, you call yourself right. My thoughts are right. Therefore, I must be giving myself good things. No psychopath in history ever called his murderous rage and his violence a bad thing. He called it a good thing because it came from my own psychic system. Therefore, it has to be good. I am right. Those people I attack are wrong. What crimes did you commit this week mentally? Oh, you don't even know what a crime is. You think I mean just by hating someone. That's a crime. Of course it is. I'm talking about any state whatsoever that you experienced this week in which you were alienated from God. In which you were apart from your real nature. It's a crime to wander out into the wilderness of your own nonsense mental nonsense. It's a crime to blab, just to hear yourself blab. Who's it a crime against? You first, then everyone else. Please don't be a conspirator anymore. For your sake. The world makes it so easy to be sick and to stay sick. So easy, nothing is easier. All you have to do is find someone whose sickness matches yours, politically, socially, sexually. Just find someone who is as sick as you are, in the same way you are, and you'll love each other until you kill each other. Nobody sees what is happening. You don't see what is happening. It just happens. And you have your eyes closed. And you come here week after week and hear these talks, which are very clearly and simply stated, and you refuse to act. Well, I said at least twice so far that most people are simply not going to make it out. They're going to wander around the jungle with their eyes closed, surrounded by the fierce lions and tigers and hyenas. And while their eyes are closed, as a substitute for facing their condition and fighting their way out of the jungle, as a substitute for that, they dream. They think. They wander away from reality. Their minds are chattering all day long. I'll tell you something I'm very personally grateful for. I can't tell you how grateful I am that I don't have to have anything to do with you people. There's such a nice, quiet, pleasant feeling and knowledge to know that I don't have to associate with you psychologically. If I see any of you trying to get too close, you already know what happens, don't you? You've seen it before. What a beautiful thing to know that all I have to do is to stay awake. And I see you coming. I don't have to fall into your sleep. You keep your dreams to yourself. You keep your anxieties to yourself. You keep your tragic future to yourself. I'm not going with you, thank heaven. I'm so grateful that reality exists and that it can be the protection, effortless protection. I'm so grateful that I don't have to live in that jungle. I don't have to bump into you. I can be outside it. I can be out on the beautiful sunlit meadow out there, enjoying myself, enjoying the company of reality. Would you like that experience? If you don't like wandering around the jungle with your eyes closed, dreaming horrid dreams, vicious dreams, if you don't like that, you don't have to do it. You don't have to keep bumping into other people who also have their eyes closed as you now do, and as you've done in the past. It can all stop. Reality is very generous. Anyone who wants it can have it. Anyone who can begin to hear can begin to understand. And hearing requires that every time you get jolted by bumping into that other person in the jungle, or a lion takes a claw to you, you bump into a tree and fall into a ditch, that you allow a certain intelligent explanation to come to you. The explanation being, there's such a thing as cause and effect. The effect was I got clawed by the lion, or I bumped into that person, wife, husband, treacherous enemy. I experienced something very painful. There must have been a cause for it. I wonder what that cause could be. Now you can find out. You can find out that there's only one cause for your trouble, which is you who's wandering around with your eyes closed, dreaming that you're out in the pretty, colorful meadow. You take relief of being with a friend, being with a spouse. You take that, you poor, stupid, deluded people, you take that as happiness. You take that as safety. You take that as the good life. The only way you're ever going to find the good and true life is to be all alone with truth. Then you can run into anyone. You could even go into the dark jungle if you wanted, and you'll never bump into anyone because you bring the light of cosmic vision into that. Nobody can bump into you. Even if they try, they can't. Again, your decision tonight then is what you're going to do with all this. And I'll give you one final reminder, then we'll have a break. Don't take your present nature as being the only nature that you can live with. Don't take your quarrelsome, fidgety, unpleasant self as the only self that is possible for you. I am telling you the truth, the 100% truth, when I tell you that you can have a new nature and you can live with that. You want to be a really rare human being instead of one of the common sheep that bleats its way through life and finally falls over the cliff. If you don't want to have the fate of sheep, then you have to become a human being. You can't remain on the animal level of a mechanical mind. You've been given all the facts. Now act on them.